Welcome to our channel. Today's story unfolds how a millionaire businessman tested his new driver, leading to an unexpected revelation. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like to support our content, please consider donating through the link in the pinned comment. Now, let's dive into this incredible tale. Maximilian Thorn, a self-made billionaire known for his cunning business acumen and unconventional methods, sat in his plush office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. His piercing blue eyes scanned the resume of his newest employee, Samuel Reeves, a humble man from a working-class background who had just been hired as Maximilian's personal driver. Maximilian had always believed that true character revealed itself when no one was watching. He'd devised a test for Samuel, one that would push the boundaries of ethics and morality. With a few taps on his smartphone, Maximilian activated the hidden cameras installed throughout his limousine. As Samuel arrived for his first day of work, Maximilian greeted him with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Samuel, I have an important meeting across town. Please have the car ready in 5 minutes." Samuel nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. I'll be waiting for you downstairs." Maximilian watched from his office window as Samuel meticulously inspected the vehicle before getting in. Just before heading down, Maximilian pulled out his wallet, stuffed with $100 bills, and placed it conspicuously on the back seat. As they drove through the busy streets of New York, Maximilian engaged Samuel in casual conversation, gauging his responses and demeanor. To his surprise, Samuel seemed genuinely interested in Maximilian's work and asked thoughtful questions about his philanthropic endeavors. Halfway through the journey, Maximilian's phone rang. It was a call he'd arranged beforehand. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but we need to make a quick stop. There's an urgent matter I must attend to in person. Please park the car and wait for me. I shouldn't be more than 30 minutes. Samuel pulled over smoothly, finding a perfect spot in front of a towering office building. As Maximilian exited the vehicle, he deliberately left his wallet in plain sight on the seat. With a final glance at Samuel through the rear-view mirror, he disappeared into the building. For the next half hour, Samuel sat patiently in the driver's seat, occasionally checking his watch. The temptation lay just inches away, a fortune that could change his life forever. Little did he know that his every move was being recorded, his integrity under the scrutiny of one of the world's most powerful men. As the minutes ticked by, Samuel's mind wandered to his family, his wife Sarah, pregnant with their first child, and the mounting medical bills they faced due to complications. The money in that wallet could solve all their problems in an instant. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. Maximilian returned precisely 30 minutes later, his face an unreadable mask. As they resumed their journey, he casually reached for his wallet, noting its position. Samuel's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, meeting Maximilian's gaze for a brief moment, before focusing back on the road. The rest of the ride passed in silence, the air thick with unspoken tension. As they pulled up to Maximilian's destination, he thanked Samuel for his service and exited the vehicle, his mind already racing to review the footage from the hidden cameras. That evening, in the privacy of his home office, Maximilian sat down to watch the recording, a glass of expensive scotch in hand. As the video began to play, he leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen, unaware that what he was about to witness would challenge everything he thought he knew about human nature and force him to confront his own deep-seated beliefs. Maximilian's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he prepared to play the footage. He took a sip of his scotch, savoring the burn as it slid down his throat. The amber liquid matched the warm glow of his desk lamp, casting long shadows across his study. With a deep breath, he pressed play. The video showed Samuel sitting motionless in the driver's seat for several minutes after Maximilian's departure. His eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, where the wallet was clearly visible. Suddenly, Samuel's shoulders slumped, and he buried his face in his hands. To Maximilian's surprise, Samuel began to speak aloud, his voice cracking with emotion. "God, give me strength," he whispered. Sarah needs that surgery. Our baby. He trailed off, his body shaking with silent sobs. Maximilian leaned closer to the screen, his heart racing. This was not the reaction he had expected. After what seemed like an eternity, Samuel straightened up, wiped his eyes, and reached for his phone. Maximilian watched, puzzled, as Samuel dialed a number and waited. "Hello, Sarah." Samuel's voice was thick with emotion. "I love you, sweetheart. I needed to hear your voice." There was a pause as he listened to his wife's response. No, everything's fine. How are you feeling? How's our little one doing?" As Samuel continued his conversation, Maximilian found himself captivated by the raw love and concern in the man's voice. He spoke to his wife about their hopes for the future, their dreams for their child, and their unwavering faith that somehow they would find a way through their financial struggles. Not once during the entire 30-minute wait did Samuel touch the wallet or even look at it directly. Instead, he spent the time reaffirming his love for his family and his determination to provide for them through honest means. Just before Maximilian's return, Samuel ended the call with his wife. "I have to go now, love. Mr. Thorne will be back soon. I'll see you tonight. I love you both so much." As the video came to an end, Maximilian sat back in his chair, stunned. He had witnessed not a moment of temptation, but a profound testament to human integrity and love. The man he had sought to test had instead taught him a powerful lesson. Guilt washed over Maximilian as he realized the cruelty of his test. He had dangled a lifeline in front of a drowning man, only to snatch it away. The weight of his actions settled heavily on his shoulders. Lost in thought, Maximilian almost missed the final moments of the footage. As he was about to close the video, he noticed Samuel reach into the back seat. His breath caught in his throat. Had he misjudged after all? But Samuel wasn't reaching for the wallet. Instead, he carefully adjusted its position, ensuring it was more secure and less likely to fall if the car braked suddenly. This small act of consideration was the final blow to Maximilian's cynicism. Overwhelmed by emotion, Maximilian poured himself another drink with shaking hands. He had started this day believing he was testing an employee. Instead, he found himself facing a mirror, forced to confront his own prejudices and the callousness that his wealth had bred in him. As the night deepened, Maximilian's mind raced with possibilities. He had the power to change Samuel's life, to reward the integrity he had witnessed. But would such an action cheapen the very quality he now admired? And what of the other employees he had tested over the years? How many good people had he misjudged, their lives potentially ruined by his arbitrary trials? The weight of these questions pressed down on him, demanding answers. As the first light of dawn began to creep through his window, Maximilian made a decision. He would not only change Samuel's life but also his own. The path forward was unclear, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of something long forgotten: hope. Little did Maximilian know that his decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of his empire and lead him on a journey of redemption he could never have imagined. As the sun rose over the New York skyline, casting a golden glow across the city, Maximilian Thorne sat at his desk, his eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. The events of the previous day played on a loop in his mind, each replay deepening his resolve to make things right. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Jenkins," he spoke, his voice hoarse, "I need you to gather some information for me. It's about our new driver, Samuel Reeves. I want to know everything: his background, his family situation, any financial troubles. And Jenkins, this is top priority. I need it within the hour." While waiting for the information, Maximilian paced his office, his mind racing with possibilities. He had always prided himself on being a shrewd businessman, able to make split-second decisions that could make or break million-dollar deals. But this was different. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain, vulnerable even. Exactly 58 minutes later, Jenkins knocked on his door, a thick file in hand. Maximilian snatched it eagerly, dismissing his assistant with a wave of his hand. As he pored over the documents, the full extent of Samuel's situation became clear. Samuel and Sarah Reeves had been high school sweethearts, married young and full of dreams. They had struggled financially, but had always managed to make ends meet through hard work and frugality. However, their world had been turned upside down when Sarah's pregnancy was diagnosed with complications. The required surgery was far beyond their means, and their insurance wouldn't cover it fully. Maximilian's throat tightened as he read about their desperate attempts to raise funds, taking on extra jobs, selling their few valuables, even considering a second mortgage on their modest home. Despite it all, they were still short by a significant amount. The final page of the report contained a statement from Samuel's previous employer. It read, "In all my years, I've never met a more honest, hard-working individual. It breaks my heart to let him go, but he deserves better than I can offer. Whoever hires Samuel Reeves will be getting not just an employee, but a man of exceptional character." Maximilian leaned back in his chair, his decision crystallizing. He couldn't undo the test he had subjected Samuel to, but he could ensure it was the last such test anyone would ever face in his company. With newfound energy, Maximilian began making calls, first to his lawyer, then to his accountant, and finally to the head of human resources. By midday, he had set in motion a series of changes that would reshape not just Samuel's life, but the entire culture of Thorn Enterprises. As the afternoon sun hung low in the sky, Maximilian called Samuel into his office. The young man entered nervously, clearly worried about being summoned by the CEO on his second day of work. "Samuel," Maximilian began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "please, take a seat." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Samuel sat down, his posture tense, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Mr. Thorn, if I've done something wrong." Maximilian held up a hand, silencing him. "You've done nothing wrong, Samuel. In fact, you've done everything right. More right than you could possibly know." Confusion flickered across Samuel's face as Maximilian continued. "Yesterday, I subjected you to a test, a cruel, unfair test that I've used on many employees over the years. I left my wallet in the car, filled with enough money to tempt even the most honest person." Samuel's eyes widened in recognition, but before he could speak, Maximilian pressed on. "I watched you, Samuel. I saw your struggle, heard your conversation with your wife, and I've never been more ashamed of myself." Tears welled up in Maximilian's eyes, shocking both himself and Samuel. "You showed me what true integrity looks like. You reminded me of the person I used to be, before wealth and power clouded my judgment." Samuel sat in stunned silence as Maximilian rose from his chair and walked around the desk. He placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to make things right, Samuel. Not just for you, but for every employee who has suffered under my misguided attempts to test their character." Reaching into his jacket pocket, Maximilian pulled out an envelope and handed it to Samuel. "This contains two things. First, a check that will cover all of your wife's medical expenses, with plenty left over to give your child the best possible start in life. Second, a contract. I'm offering you a new position, Samuel, not as my driver, but as the head of a new division in Thorn Enterprises, one dedicated to ethical business practices and employee welfare." Samuel's hands shook as he opened the envelope, his eyes widening at the amount on the check. "Mr. Thorn, I don't know what to say. This is too much. I can't possibly—" Maximilian held up his hand again, a small smile playing on his lips. "You can, and you will. Consider it not just a gift, but an investment. An investment in integrity, in the kind of person I want working for me, shaping the future of this company." As Samuel struggled to find words, Maximilian felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey, for himself, for Samuel, and for Thorn Enterprises. But for the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path. Little did either man know that this moment would set in motion a series of events that would not only transform their lives, but ripple out to touch countless others in ways they could never have imagined. In the weeks that followed Samuel's promotion, Thorn Enterprises underwent a transformation that sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Maximilian, true to his word, dismantled the clandestine testing program and instituted a series of sweeping reforms aimed at fostering a culture of trust and ethical behavior. Samuel, still reeling from the sudden change in his fortunes, threw himself into his new role with characteristic dedication. His first task was to review the cases of all employees who had been dismissed or passed over for promotion due to Maximilian's former testing practices. It was a Herculean effort, but one that Samuel approached with unwavering determination. One such case was that of Emilia Rodriguez, a brilliant young analyst who had been fired 3 years ago after failing one of Maximilian's tests. Samuel tracked her down to a small nonprofit where she was working for a fraction of her former salary. "Miss Rodriguez," Samuel said, sitting across from her in a modest coffee shop, "I'm here on behalf of Thorn Enterprises to offer you not just your old job back, but a senior position in our new ethics and compliance department." Amelia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would I ever want to work for Thorn again? That place destroyed my career, my confidence, my life." Samuel leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Because things have changed, Miss Rodriguez, Maximilian Thorn has changed, and we need people like you to help ensure it stays that way." As Samuel explained the situation, Amelia's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious hope. By the end of their meeting, she had tentatively agreed to consider the offer. Meanwhile, Maximilian was facing his own challenges. News of the changes at Thorn Enterprises had not been well received by everyone. Several board members, led by the ruthless Victor Blackwell, were pushing back hard against what they saw as a dangerous departure from proven business practices. "This is madness, Maximilian," Victor snarled during a particularly heated board meeting. "You're going to run this company into the ground with your newfound conscience." Maximilian stood firm, his voice steady. "What's madness, Victor, is continuing to operate as if ethics and profitability are mutually exclusive. We have an opportunity here to set a new standard, to show that integrity can be a competitive advantage." As the argument escalated, Samuel, who had been invited to present his progress report, quietly intervened. "If I may, Mr. Blackwell," he said, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room, "I have some data that might interest you." Samuel proceeded to present a comprehensive analysis, showing how the new policies were already yielding results. Employee satisfaction was up, productivity had increased, and there had been a notable uptick in unsolicited job applications from top talent in the industry. Moreover, Samuel concluded, "We've seen a 15% increase in new contracts since news of our ethical reforms broke. It seems that many clients prefer to do business with a company they can trust." Victor and his allies were momentarily silenced, but Maximilian knew this was far from over. The old guard wouldn't give up their power without a fight. As the weeks turned into months, "I had to come and thank you in person. What you've done for us, for so many others, it's beyond words." Maximilian, caught off guard by the raw emotion in her voice, found himself at a loss for words. It was Samuel who broke the silence. "Sir," he said, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder, "we've decided to name our son Max, after you." For a moment, Maximilian Thorn, the man who had built an empire through cunning and ruthlessness, felt his carefully constructed facade crumble. Tears welled up in his eyes as the full weight of his actions, both past and present, crashed over him. As he looked at Samuel and Sarah, at the life they were about to bring into the world, Maximilian made a silent vow. He would see this through, no matter the cost. The Thorn Revolution would not be just a corporate makeover, but a genuine force for change in the world. Little did he know that the greatest challenges, and the most profound revelations, still lay ahead. Forces were aligning against him, both within and outside the company, that would test his newfound convictions to their very limits. As Samuel and Sarah left his office, Maximilian turned to look out over the city he had once sought to conquer. Now, he realized, he had a chance to truly serve it. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. It was, Maximilian thought with a smile, a fitting metaphor for the dawning of a new era, not just for Thorne Enterprises, but for himself. As autumn leaves began to paint New York City in vibrant hues of red and gold, the winds of change continued to sweep through Thorne Enterprises. However, with change came resistance, and the storm clouds of opposition were gathering on the horizon. Victor Blackwell, still smarting from his defeat at the board meeting, had not been idle. In dimly lit restaurants and exclusive clubs, he had been whispering in the ears of influential shareholders, planting seeds of doubt about Maximilian's new direction. "Think about it," Victor would say, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Maximilian's always been ruthless. What if this is just another one of his schemes? A long con to boost our public image before selling us out?" Meanwhile, her analytical skills, combined with her first-hand experience of the company's former practices, made her an invaluable asset in reshaping corporate policies. One crisp October morning, Amelia burst into Samuel's office, her face pale with concern. "Samuel, we have a problem," she said, dropping a thick file on his desk. "I've been going through our international contracts, and I've found some irregularities." Samuel frowned as he flipped through the documents. "These look like bribes," he said, his voice tight with tension. "But they're all from before the changes. Surely we can't be held responsible for—" "It's not that simple," Amelia interrupted. "Some of these contracts are still active. If this gets out, it could undo everything we've been working for." As Samuel and Amelia grappled with this new crisis, across town, Maximilian was facing a challenge of a different kind. He sat in a private room at New York Presbyterian Hospital, holding Sarah's hand as she struggled through a difficult labor. "Where's Samuel?" Sarah gasped between contractions. "He should be here by now." Maximilian squeezed her hand reassuringly. "He's on his way, Sarah. There was an urgent matter at the office, but he'll be here soon." In truth, Maximilian had no idea where Samuel was. He had left several increasingly frantic messages, but had received no response. As the hours ticked by, Maximilian found himself in the unfamiliar role of emotional support, coaching Sarah through her breathing exercises and offering words of encouragement. Back at Thorne Enterprises, Samuel and Amelia were working feverishly to untangle the web of questionable contracts. As they dug deeper, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. "Samuel," Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper, "these all lead back to one person, Victor Blackwell." Before Samuel could respond, his phone buzzed with another missed call notification from Maximilian. Suddenly, the weight of his divided responsibilities came crashing down on him. His wife was in labor, his mentor needed him, and the company he had come to believe in was teetering on the brink of a scandal. With a heavy heart, Samuel made a decision. "Amelia, I need you to take this to Maximilian. Tell him everything we've found. I have to get to the hospital." As Samuel rushed out, Amelia gathered the damning documents, her mind racing with the implications of what they had uncovered. She knew that taking this information to Maximilian could spark a corporate civil war, but the alternative, allowing the corrupt practices to continue, was unthinkable. Across the city, in a luxurious penthouse apartment, Victor Blackwell sat before a group of Thorne Enterprises' largest shareholders. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, a predatory smile playing on his lips, "I believe the time has come to call for a vote of no confidence in Maximilian Thorne." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement and dissent. Victor raised his hand for silence. "I know some of you may have doubts, but I assure you, I have information that will make our course of action very clear." As Victor began to lay out his case against Maximilian, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, his smug expression faltering for a moment before he quickly regained his composure. The message was from an anonymous source within Thorn Enterprises. They know. Rodriguez and Reeves have the contracts. Moving to inform MT. Victor's mind raced as he continued his presentation, knowing that the carefully laid plans he had nurtured for months were suddenly in jeopardy. He needed to act fast, to discredit Maximilian before the truth could come to light. As the night deepened, the various players in this corporate drama found themselves at a crossroads. Maximilian, still at the hospital, was torn between his duty to Sarah and his growing concern for the company. Samuel, stuck in gridlocked traffic, was racked with guilt over his divided loyalties. Amelia, armed with explosive information, was racing against time to reach Maximilian. And Victor, sensing his carefully constructed plot unraveling, was prepared to take desperate measures to salvage his ambitions. In the midst of this brewing storm, in a sterile hospital room, a new life was fighting to enter the world. Baby Max, blissfully unaware of the tumultuous circumstances surrounding his birth, yet destined to play a pivotal role in the unfolding drama. As the clock struck midnight, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of Thorn Enterprises, but the very soul of the business world it inhabited. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the New York skyline when Amelia Rodriguez finally reached Maximilian at the hospital. Her clothes were rumpled, her eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night, but her determination was unwavering. "Mr. Thorn," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I'm sorry to disturb you at a time like this, but we have a situation that can't wait." Maximilian, who had been dozing in an uncomfortable chair outside Sarah's room, snapped to attention. He led Amelia to a quiet corner of the waiting room, his face grave as she laid out the evidence of Victor's malfeasance. As Amelia spoke, Maximilian felt a complex mixture of emotions wash over him. Anger at Victor's betrayal, disappointment in himself for not seeing it sooner, and a gnawing fear about what this could mean for the company's future. "Thank you, Amelia," he said when she had finished. "You've shown tremendous courage in bringing this to me. Now, I need you to do something else. Go home, get some rest. What's coming next? It's not going to be pretty." Amelia hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave at such a crucial moment. But Maximilian's tone brooked no argument. With a nod, she turned to go, pausing at the door to say, "We believe in you, Mr. Thorn, all of us." As Amelia left, Samuel burst into the waiting room, his tie askew and his face etched with worry. "Mr. Thorn, I'm so sorry. The traffic was a nightmare, and then the situation at the office." Maximilian held up a hand, silencing him. "It's all right, Samuel. Sarah's doing fine. The baby hasn't arrived yet, but the doctors say it won't be long now." His voice softened as he added, "You haven't missed anything. Go to her." Relief flooded Samuel's features as he rushed to his wife's room. Maximilian watched him go, a bittersweet smile on his face. Then, squaring his shoulders, he pulled out his phone and began to make calls. Across town, Victor Blackwell was already at Thorn Enterprises, orchestrating what he hoped would be Maximilian's downfall. He had called an emergency board meeting, confident that he had the votes to oust Maximilian and take control of the company. As board members filed into the conference room, Victor felt a surge of triumph. This was his moment, the culmination of years of patient maneuvering. He opened his mouth to call the meeting to order, but before he could speak, the doors burst open. Maximilian Thorn strode in, his presence filling the room. Gone was the introspective, conflicted man of recent months. This was the Maximilian of old, commanding, intimidating, a force of nature in an impeccably tailored suit. "Gentlemen," Maximilian said, his voice cold as steel, "I believe there's been some confusion about the purpose of this meeting. Allow me to clarify." For the next hour, Maximilian laid out the evidence of Victor's corruption with surgical precision. He presented documents, emails, and testimony that painted a damning picture of Victor's activities. Victor, initially smug, grew increasingly pale as Maximilian spoke. When he finally found his voice, it was to sputter denials and accusations. "This is a setup," he cried. "Maximilian is trying to distract you from his own failures." But the tide had turned. Board members who had been ready to vote against Maximilian now sat in stunned silence, the weight of their near mistake heavy upon them. As the meeting reached its climax, Maximilian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a genuine smile breaking through his stern facade. "Gentlemen," he said, "if you'll excuse me for a moment, I've just become a godfather." In the ensuing silence, Victor made a desperate lunge for the door, only to find his path blocked by two stern-faced security guards. As he was led away, the reality of his downfall finally seemed to sink in. Maximilian returned to the boardroom a few minutes later, his eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "Now," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "let's talk about the future of Thorn Enterprises." For the next several hours, Maximilian outlined his vision for the company, a vision of ethical business practices, employee empowerment, and social responsibility. It was a radical departure from the cutthroat world of corporate America, but as he spoke, the board members found themselves caught up in his enthusiasm. By the time the sun was setting, a new era had dawned for Thorn Enterprises. Victor Blackwell was facing criminal charges. The board had unanimously backed Maximilian's new direction, and plans were already in motion to address and rectify the damage done by the corrupt contracts. As Maximilian finally left the office, exhausted but exhilarated, he found Samuel waiting for him in the lobby. "Mr. Thorn," Samuel said, his face beaming with pride and gratitude, "I don't know how to thank you for everything." Maximilian clasped the younger man's shoulder. "No thanks necessary, Samuel. You and your family, you've given me far more than I could ever repay. Now, let's go meet this godson of mine." As they walked out into the cool evening air, Maximilian felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead would not be easy, changing an entire corporate culture never was. But for the first time in years, he was truly excited about the future. Little did he know that the true test of his newfound principles was yet to come, and that baby Max would play a pivotal role in a challenge that would shake Thorn Enterprises to its very foundations. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Thorn Enterprises, under Maximilian's revolutionary leadership, had become a beacon of ethical business practices in the corporate world. The company's success had sparked a movement, with other corporations scrambling to adopt similar policies. On a bright spring morning, Maximilian sat in his office, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. The numbers were impressive, but it was the human stories behind them that truly made him smile. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, turnover was practically non-existent, and the company's charitable initiatives were making real differences in communities around the globe. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he called out. Samuel entered, looking sharp in a tailored suit that was a far cry from the humble attire he'd worn on his first day as a driver. "Good morning, Mr. Thorn," he said, a warm smile on his face. Maximilian chuckled. "Samuel, how many times do I have to tell you? It's Max, we're way past formalities." Samuel grinned sheepishly. "Old habits die hard, I suppose. Anyway, I wanted to remind you about Max's kindergarten graduation ceremony this afternoon. Sarah and I would be honored if you could attend." Maximilian's face lit up. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. That boy, he's something special, isn't he?" As if on cue, a whirlwind of energy burst into the office. 5-year-old Max Reeves, with his father's kind eyes and his mother's determined chin, ran straight for Maximilian. "Uncle Max," the boy cried, launching himself into Maximilian's waiting arms. "Are you coming to see me get my diploma today?" Maximilian laughed, swinging the boy around. "You bet I am, champ. I hear you're going to give a speech." Max nodded solemnly. "Uh-huh. It's about what I want to be when I grow up." "Oh." Maximilian raised an eyebrow, glancing at Samuel. And what might that be? Max puffed out his chest proudly. I'm gonna be just like you and Daddy. I'm gonna help people and make the world better. The adults exchanged touched glances over the boy's head. Maximilian felt a lump form in his throat. This, he realized, was his true legacy. Not the buildings that bore his name or the fortune he'd amassed, but the values he was passing on to the next generation. As Samuel ushered his son out, promising ice cream after the ceremony, Maximilian turned back to his desk. His eye caught a small news item on his tablet that made him frown. A new company, Phoenix Industries, had been making waves in the tech sector with some ethically questionable practices. Maximilian made a mental note to look into it further. If there was one thing he'd learned over the past 5 years, it was that the fight for ethical business practices was never truly over. The graduation ceremony was a delightful affair. Max, resplendent in a miniature cap and gown, delivered his speech with a poise that belied his years. As Maximilian watched, he felt a surge of pride so intense it almost overwhelmed him. Later that evening, as Maximilian was preparing to leave the office, his phone rang. It was Amelia Rodriguez, now the head of Thorne's Ethics and Compliance Department. "Max," she said, her voice tense. "We've got a situation. It's about Phoenix Industries. I think you need to see this." Maximilian's brow furrowed. "I'll be right there." As he made his way to Amelia's office, a sense of unease settled over him. Something in her tone had set off alarm bells in his mind. Amelia was waiting for him, a grim expression on her face. Without a word, she handed him a file. As Maximilian read, his face grew increasingly pale. Phoenix Industries, it seemed, was more than just a competitor with questionable ethics. It was a front for a consortium of old guard businessmen, including some former Thorne Enterprises board members, who were determined to prove that Maximilian's ethical approach to business was doomed to fail. Their plan was audacious and ruthless. They were deliberately undercutting Thorne Enterprises on key contracts, spreading misinformation about the company's practices, and even attempting to poach top talent with promises of enormous salaries. But the truly chilling part was yet to come. As Maximilian turned the final page, he felt his blood run cold. There, in black and white, was a detailed plan to use Max, young Max Reeves, as leverage against Thorne Enterprises. "They wouldn't," Maximilian breathed, his hands shaking with a mixture of fury and fear. Amelia's voice was soft but firm. "They would, Max. These people, they're desperate. They see what we're doing here as a threat to their very way of life." Maximilian slumped into a chair, his mind racing. Everything he had worked for over the past 5 years, the trust he had built, the changes he had implemented, was suddenly at risk. And worse, an innocent child, a child he loved as his own, was now in danger. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Maximilian realized he was facing the greatest challenge of his life. He would have to find a way to protect his company, his employees, and young Max, all while staying true to the ethical principles that had become the cornerstone of his life and business. The storm that had been gathering on the horizon was about to break, and Maximilian Thorne found himself at its center, with everything he held dear hanging in the balance. The next few weeks were a blur of activity for Maximilian and his team. They worked around the clock, implementing new security measures, analyzing Phoenix Industries' every move, and preparing for what felt like an inevitable confrontation. Samuel and Sarah were informed of the potential threat to their son, and young Max was assigned a discreet security detail. The boy, blissfully unaware of the danger, thought his new friends were just part of a fun game. One crisp autumn morning, Maximilian called an emergency meeting with his core team, Samuel, Amelia, and a handful of trusted executives. "We can't just play defense anymore," Maximilian declared, his voice firm. "It's time we took the fight to them." Amelia leaned forward, her eyes bright with determination. "What do you have in mind, Max?" Maximilian outlined his plan. It was bold, risky, and walked a fine ethical line. but it was their best shot at exposing Phoenix Industries and protecting everything they had built. As the team dispersed to put the plan into action, Samuel lingered behind. "Max," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure about this? The risk?" Maximilian placed a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. "I know, Samuel, but we can't let them win. We can't let them turn back the clock on all the progress we've made." Over the next few days, rumors began to circulate in the business world. Thorn Enterprises, it was whispered, was on the verge of a major breakthrough, a revolutionary new technology that would change the face of the industry. Phoenix Industries took the bait. Their attempts to gather information about the non-existent technology became increasingly aggressive and sloppy. Maximilian's team carefully documented every illicit approach, every attempted bribe, every instance of corporate espionage. But the leaders of Phoenix weren't content with just stealing information. They wanted to crush Thorn Enterprises completely, and they knew just how to do it. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Maximilian received the call he had been dreading. Young Max hadn't arrived at his after-school program. The security detail had been skillfully misdirected. The boy was missing. The next few hours were the longest of Maximilian's life. Police were called, searches were organized, and every resource at Thorn Enterprises' disposal was mobilized to find the boy. As night fell, Maximilian sat in his office, his head in his hands. The weight of guilt pressed down on him. Had his actions, his choices, led to this moment? Had his determination to change the business world put an innocent child in danger? Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We have the boy. If you want him back, dismantle your company. You have 24 hours. Maximilian's blood ran cold. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything he had worked for, everything he believed in, was being put to the ultimate test. With shaking hands, he called Samuel and Sarah, sharing the news of the ransom demand. Their anguished cries tore at his heart. "I'll do whatever it takes," and he promised them. "We'll get Max back." As he ended the call, Maximilian found himself facing the most difficult decision of his life. Should he give in to the demands, sacrificing his company and his vision for a more ethical business world? Or should he stand firm, risking the life of an innocent child? The clock was ticking. Phoenix Industries thought they had backed Maximilian into a corner, but they had underestimated the depth of his resolve and the strength of the bonds he had forged. As the first light of dawn broke over the city, Maximilian Thorn made his choice. It was time to prove once and for all that ethics and success were not mutually exclusive, even in the face of unimaginable pressure. With a deep breath, he picked up his phone and began to set in motion a plan that would either save everything he had built or destroy it all. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of young Max, but the very soul of Thorn Enterprises and the future of ethical business practices in the corporate world. As the sun rose over New York City, Maximilian Thorn stood at the window of his office, his face a mask of determination. But with young Max's life hanging in the balance, he knew he had to take that risk. "Amelia, Samuel," he said, turning to face his two most trusted allies who had been with him through the night. "It's time to put our cards on the table." Maximilian's plan was multifaceted. First, he would appear to comply with Phoenix Industries' demands, announcing a press conference where he would discuss the future of Thorn Enterprises. This would buy them time and, hopefully, ensure Max's safety. Second, he had secretly reached out to journalists, regulators, and even competitors who had been victims of Phoenix's unethical practices. They were poised to act on his signal. Finally, and most daringly, Maximilian had decided to use himself as bait. "They want to destroy me," he said, his voice steady. "So let's give them the opportunity." As the hours ticked by, the plan was set in motion. News of Thorn Enterprises. Impending announcement sent shockwaves through the business world. Speculation ran rampant. Was this the end of Maximilian Thorn's ethical business experiment? At precisely noon, Maximilian stepped up to the podium in the packed press room of Thorn Tower. Cameras flashed as he began to speak, his voice broadcast live across the globe. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I stand before you today at a crossroads. For the past 5 years, we at Thorn Enterprises have strived to prove that ethical business practices and profitability can go hand in hand. We have faced challenges, skepticism, and outright hostility, but we have persevered." He paused, his eyes scanning the room. Somewhere in the sea of faces, he knew, were agents of Phoenix Industries, waiting for him to crumble. "Today, I face the greatest challenge of my career. I have been given an ultimatum: dismantle my company or face consequences that I cannot bear." A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not the confident, unflappable Maximilian Thorn they were used to seeing. "And so," he continued, his voice breaking slightly, "it is with a heavy heart that I announce my immediate resignation as CEO of Thorn Enterprises. I will be divesting my shares in the company and stepping down from the board, effective immediately." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed incessantly, and in the midst of it all, Maximilian Thorn walked off the stage, looking for all the world like a broken man. But as he exited the press room, a small, triumphant smile played at the corners of his mouth. Phase 1 was complete. Now for the real work to begin. In a secured room several floors above, Samuel and Amelia watched the press conference with bated breath. As soon as Maximilian was off stage, they sprang into action. Amelia began coordinating with their network of allies, releasing a flood of information about Phoenix Industries' illegal activities to journalists and regulators around the world. Samuel, meanwhile, was working with a team of ethical hackers, following the digital trail left by the kidnappers. They had anticipated that Phoenix would let their guard down after Maximilian's announcement, and they were right. As evening fell, Maximilian found himself in a seedy bar on the outskirts of the city, playing the part of a man drowning his sorrows. It wasn't long before he was approached by a nondescript man in a suit. "Mr. Thorn," the man said, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Maximilian looked up, feigning surprise and defeat. "Business? I don't have any business left to discuss." The man smiled coldly. "Oh, I think you do. My employers would like to offer you a chance at redemption." As Maximilian allowed himself to be led out of the bar, he activated the hidden tracker in his watch. The endgame was approaching. Across town, in an abandoned warehouse, young Max Reeves sat huddled in a corner, scared but unharmed. He clutched a small action figure, a gift from his Uncle Max, and whispered to himself, "Be brave, be smart, be kind, just like Uncle Max says." Little did the boy know that his courage was about to be put to the test, as the forces set in motion by Maximilian Thorn converged for a final, decisive confrontation. As night fell over New York City, the pieces of Maximilian Thorn's audacious plan began to fall into place. The warehouse where young Max was being held had been located, thanks to the combined efforts of Samuel's hacking team and the information gleaned from Maximilian's covert meeting. Maximilian himself was being driven to what his captors believed would be the final nail in the coffin of Thorn Enterprises. Little did they know that every moment, every word, was being recorded and transmitted to Amelia and a team of federal agents standing by. In the warehouse, Max Reeves clutched his action figure tighter as he heard commotion outside his makeshift cell. The door burst open, and to his amazement, he saw his father leading a team of police officers. "Daddy!" Max cried, running into Samuel's arms. Samuel held his son tight, tears of relief streaming down his face. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now. You were so brave." As father and son were reunited, across town, Maximilian was being led into a luxurious penthouse office. There, he came face to face with the masterminds behind Phoenix Industries, a rogues gallery of former business rivals, disgruntled ex-employees, and corrupt officials. At their center stood Victor Blackwell, the man Maximilian had ousted years ago. His face was twisted in a triumphant sneer. "Well, well, Maximilian, how the mighty have fallen." Maximilian stood tall, his eyes blazing with a fire that took his captors by surprise. "You're right, Victor. The mighty have fallen. But not me." With perfect timing, the doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, led by Amelia Rodriguez. Federal agents. Everyone freeze. The look of shock on Victor's face was almost comical. "What? How?" Maximilian stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. "Did you really think I'd give up everything I've built so easily? You underestimated me, Victor. You underestimated the power of doing the right thing." As the conspirators were led away in handcuffs, Maximilian's phone buzzed. It was a text from Samuel. "Max is safe. Thank you." Relief washed over Maximilian. The gambit had paid off. The child was safe. The corrupt executives were headed for justice, and Thorn Enterprises stood vindicated. The next morning, Maximilian held another press conference. This time, his voice was strong, his stance confident. He revealed the truth behind his apparent resignation, exposed the plot against his company, and reaffirmed his commitment to ethical business practices. "Yesterday, we faced our greatest challenge," he declared. "Today, we stand stronger than ever. This experience has proven that ethics and success are not mutually exclusive. They are, in fact, inseparable." The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from around the world. Other companies pledged to follow Thorn Enterprises' ethical model. It seemed that Maximilian's vision for a more responsible corporate world was finally taking root. Weeks later, Maximilian sat in his office, looking out over the city. Samuel entered, leading young Max by the hand. "Uncle Max," the boy cried, running to hug Maximilian. "Daddy says you're a hero." Maximilian knelt down to Max's level. "No, buddy, you're the hero. You were so brave." Max beamed, then grew serious. "Uncle Max, when I grow up, I still want to be just like you. I want to help people and do the right thing, even when it's hard." Maximilian felt a lump in his throat. He looked up at Samuel, who was watching the scene with pride. In that moment, Maximilian knew that everything he had gone through, every challenge he had faced, had been worth it. "You know what, Max?" Maximilian said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think you're already well on your way." As the sun set over New York City, casting a golden glow over Thorn Tower, Maximilian Thorn realized that his true legacy wasn't just the company he had built or the ethical standards he had set. It was the impact he had made on people's lives, the inspiration he had provided to the next generation. The story of Thorn Enterprises and the brave little boy named Max would be told for years to come, a testament to the power of integrity, courage, and the unwavering belief that doing the right thing, no matter how difficult, was always worth it in the end. And so, as night fell and the city lights began to twinkle, Maximilian Thorn looked to the future with hope and determination, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that he had not just changed a company, but had started a movement that would shape the business world for generations to come. He had spent the night formulating a plan that was as audacious as it was risky. Amelia Rodriguez had accepted the position at Thorn Enterprises and was quickly proving her worth.